concerns me to no end that we have the largest, most polluted drinking water source in the whole state in Falls Lake.
Falls Lake is pretty nasty right now.
Falls Lake is seriously impaired by pollution coming in from its watershed and likely the overlying airshed as well, but it's easy to see water pollution problems coming in through tributaries at the upper end of the lake. It's very easy to see that. The upper end of the lake is seriously impaired for chlorophyll concentrations, in other words, too much algae from too many nutrients that are coming into the lake from croplands, from lawn fertilizers, from septic tanks, from all the things that we're supposed to be protecting this lake against, since it is the most important water supply in the area.
Our drinking water.
Falls Lake provides drinking water to almost 500,000 people in Wake County. Falls Lake is rated by the state as impaired or polluted for both chlorophyll A, which is algae overgrowth, and turbidity from sediment and soil erosion.
And what will the water quality be? Because it's going to be threatened by increasing development to keep up with the growth. That is an enormous challenge that is going to affect all of us for decades to come. And if we don't have water, and if we don't have clean water, we're going to have huge problems down the road. And frankly, if we want to grow, we have to have not just water, but clean water.
Falls Lake has 5 goals or missions. The first, and they're all equally weighted, so you're not going to optimize one of these at the expense of another, which is, it's important to understand that. It provides flood protection for downstream communities. The original plan that was created in 1965 called for the creation of Falls Lake, but other reservoirs or flood control facilities further down in the Neuse. I think there were maybe 12 of them originally proposed, but Falls Lake would take care of like the majority, or it would take a huge chunk of the responsibility for downstream flooding, but it was never intended to completely protect downstream communities, which is important for people to understand. Secondly, it was designed to provide water storage or a water supply for Raleigh. The facilities that had existed were really limiting growth, and Raleigh was, experiencing regular droughts, and it was understood, even back in the 30s, that Raleigh needed a reliable source of water. Third, it's designed to provide water quality downstream as well as, to a degree, water quality within the reservoir. So that means that you can't just send down unoxygenated, crummy water downstream. You have to, as a matter of law, and also just the objectives of the lake, you have to make sure that the quality of water that's sent downstream is not impaired. Those communities have a right to water in the same way that we do. Fourth, it was designed to provide recreation. That was not an afterthought. That was part of the design process, and it's sort of part of the public laws established by Congress that whenever the Corps would create these water resource projects, they had to take into account the recreational opportunities that presented themselves. So you're not just going to have a reservoir with no place for, because people are going to take advantage of it, and so you want to have a safe way for the public to enjoy the resources. And then fifth, to provide for wildlife management.
Lake's had water quality problems since it was built, more than probably almost 30 years ago. So it's going to take a while to restore it. And that's in the face of rapid land use change, population growth in the region. So we have to really work hard just to maintain the water quality we've got. So
The time to protect falls and Jordan Lakes is now. Not next year, not the year after next, but right now.
Richard Whitted, Chairman, Triangle J Council of Governments, August 9th, 1983.
Heard on a number of occasions that Durham was a leader in watershed protections. So I was curious about the history of watershed protection and Durham's role in watershed protection. As it turns out, about 75% of Lake Mickey's watershed is in Person County. And there's also a large number of percentage in Orange County. But back in the 80s, Durham was concerned about percentage of watershed development in Person County, which is upstream of them. And of course, Lake Mickey and Little River are the water resources for Durham. So back in the 80s, Durham funded a study And here's the study here. It's a report, and it's a rather thick report. It's a watershed management study for Lake Mickey and Little River Reservoir watersheds, County of Durham, June 1989. And what this study shows is, it shows how much impervious surface, and of course impervious surface would be rooftops, roads, anywhere where rain can't infiltrate, but how much impervious surface would lead to stream degradation in the watershed. And they came up with 6% impervious surface. So Durham became very involved in making the watershed 6% impervious surface around Lake Mickey and Little River. So in fact, in Durham, it's 6% non-critical and critical. And I'll show you a map on that so that you can understand how much development that is. So here's Durham, and this is the watershed areas for Lake Mickey and Little River. And so this whole area here, which is about 1/5 of Durham County, is 6% impervious surface, and that's critical and non-critical. So the rest of the area of Durham is 24 to 70% impervious surface. Now the issue with that is, here is the water supply watershed for Jordan Lake. Here's Jordan Lake here. Of course, that's 24 to 70% impervious surface. And here is the water supply watershed for Falls Lake, and that is 24 to 70% impervious surface also, and it goes into the critical watershed.
1992 Triangle J Resolution on Watershed Protection.
Triangle J noted the weakening of the rules that would allow twice the development density and more types of industry in the watershed. The rules adopted in 1992 were weaker than the statewide rules adopted in 1990 and weaker in many respects than the guidelines adopted by Triangle J in 1984 and weaker than the regulations many local governments adopted in the region.
Failure of the state to protect Falls Lake.
Mayor Avery Upchurch thought the statewide restrictions that emerged would not be strict enough to protect Falls Lake. Based on studies done in this region, the new EMC rules would allow significant degradation of our drinking water supplies.
What is the condition of Falls Lake now?
WRAL News in Raleigh reports.
More than 400,000 people count on the lake for drinking water, but the lake is polluted. WRL's Dan Bowens reports a plan is underway to get it healthy and clean.
Falls Lake is the drinking source for more than 400,000 Wake County residents, so it may be surprising to hear a state senator say this.
It concerns me to no end that we have the largest, most polluted drinking water source in the whole state in Falls Lake.
Algae and sediment collecting in sections here have made this the most polluted water source in the entire state. State leaders say a plan to clean it all up must be in place by January of 2011.
I think we need to be as candid with ourselves and our citizens as possible, and that is the current rules aren't working.
The city of Raleigh wants strict guidelines specifically focusing on septic tanks, discharges, and tougher development standards north of the lake in Durham and Granville counties.
Unless we all change our practices to the best level of technology, we really don't have a chance to improve the quality of the lake. And the sooner we can do that and all get on board to do that, then the better off we will be.
But those changes could be a difficult sell. Durham is on the record saying January of 2011 is too soon to expect to have a plan in place.
I think that what we have to do is balance.
Senator Stein says everyone agrees there is a problem. Fixing that problem, though, he says, is still a work in process.
They're hearing from Durham, they're hearing from Granville, they're hearing from Wake and Raleigh, and they're going to come up with rules that get the job done, but do it in a way that's actually reasonable. Dan Bones, WRL News, Wake County.
What this lake is impaired for, it's impaired for chlorophyll A, which is a pigment that algae make, and it can be indicative of nutrient loading. And so the more nutrients you get, the more chlorophyll A is usually the relationship is generated. And that can lead to a lot of aquatic life issues, dissolved oxygen problems, things like that, as well as can create issues for drinking water. And the chlorophyll A itself doesn't, but we hope we can show a relationship between chlorophyll A and TOC. There's also been issues with turbidity in the upper part of the lake where they've had a lot of runoff and things like that, where they have high turbidity levels, which is cloudiness in the water. And that can also cause aquatic life problems. So as a utility, we tend to have our blinders on about drinking water issues and how this affects our treatability of the water.
We've got problems. We have too many nutrients, which means basically our lake has gotten fat. The same way a human absorbs too many nutrients from their food, too many calories, the lake has absorbed too many calories, more or less. And it's caused the algae within the lake to explode and create far larger colonies that it should have. So when that algae goes and dies, the bacteria that compose it suck all the oxygen out, and then the fish don't have anything to breathe. So it's a compounded effect. And in addition, we're having sedimentation problems. While we've improved some of the sedimentation legislation during the last year, the pieces that already exist in current development haven't been put in ways that really make a long-term difference. We're still seeing problems off of existing development with sediment, and that's not something that the lake can sustain. It's not going to get better unless we make some significant steps forward. And we saw massive fish kills in the lower Neuse this summer. I don't want us to get to the point where we're seeing massive fish kills in Falls Lake, but if we continue to have algal blooms and those continue to suck oxygen out, Falls Lake is next.
I am in partnership with the City of Raleigh. The Center for Applied Aquatic Ecology at NC State has partnered with the City of Raleigh, and I'm the director of that center, to help safeguard Raleigh's water supply. One of the most important things we do in that regard is that we've installed real-time remote monitoring stations that monitor the area by the intake of our water treatment plant 24/7. We've set it up for 3-hour intervals and monitoring so that we can help the city determine when sudden spikes of sediment loading come in, a sudden algal bloom at a certain depth, so that they can avoid those problem areas in the depth of water where they take the water in from their intake. We're also working with the city to try to help them profile how water quality changes going down the lake. The City of Raleigh, of course, is concerned. Cyanobacteria used to be called blue-green algae, and they're a type of algae or very problematic microorganism that causes blooms and really responds to nutrient pollution. So the more nutrients, the more cyanobacteria love it. And they are common culprits at discoloring the water, turning it slimy, greenish. They also, quite a few of them can make toxins. And those toxins can cause serious human illness. Cyanobacteria are about 75% of the algal cells in the lake during the summer. So in other words, Falls Lake's water is dominated by potentially toxic cyanobacteria in the summer months.
Right now, the water plant is operating at maximum capacity and with our ability to treat the TOC at Falls Lake currently. So in other words, we're optimized now. If it stays here or goes down, we'll be in good shape. If it does increase, we would have to implement these advanced treatment technologies and to be able to treat this properly so the HAAs and the THMs do not get to dangerous levels. The number one thing that would have to happen is that this technology would have to be paid for by ratepayers. Like anything else that we do, ratepayers have to support this. But this would be a significant cost. This we estimate to be around $240, $250 million to implement this. And there's some other associated costs beyond that.
A lot of nutrients are coming in from the upper tributaries in the lake. They're coming in from cities, from stormwater runoff, from septic tanks, as I mentioned, from poorly treated sewage.
Stormwater runoff is the #1 cause of water pollution in the United States. Polluted stormwater runoff is the #1 threat to water quality in North Carolina. What are the biggest threats to water quality for Falls Lake? So the new urban growth area is around Falls Lake, and it even goes into the critical part of the watershed.
Fundamentally, what really has to change is the political will to stop developing the watershed close to the lake so that the impairment continues unabated.
already the three main creeks that flow to Falls Lake are impaired in Durham. It's Ellerby Creek, Little Lick, and Lick Creek. All three are on the 303D list.
Sort of parallel to Creedmoor Road, Highway 50, is a fault underneath, which is called the Jonesboro Fault. And it separates this metamorphic geology to the east of 50 with the sedimentary rock geology on the western part in Durham County.
So why is this a problem? Well, in this area of water supply watershed, it's also Triassic Basin soils. And what are Triassic Basin soils? Well, millions of years ago, there's a fault line called the Jonesboro Fault, and this fault line opened up, and all this fine sediment during the Triassic period washed in. So this sediment is highly, excessively erosive, and it's also impermeable. So what happens when you start developing these highly erosive soils? Well, you get creeks and streams that look like this. Lick Creek is impaired also, and you can tell that the stream banks have eroded a great deal. The trees are falling in, and it's in very bad shape. You can also tell from developments in Triassic Basin soil areas that they have problems with erosive soils for years. Here's another subdivision, and the rainfall was only 0.32 inches, and you can tell that the runoff is really quite amazing.
Yeah, that's a concern for sure. You know, sediment, there's much more erosion up in the Durham portion of it, and we have to be mindful of that because that limits the capacity of the lake. Once, you know, the sediment fills the lake, it's essentially not going to be able to provide volume of water. So the Corps does do sediment studies, and they're mindful of that.
The concern about Falls Lake really isn't just about water quality, it is actually about quantity, because as all the sediment flows into the lake, we are reducing the capacity of the water in that lake, and it's already a very shallow lake. When we had the drought a few years ago, we literally saw the bottom of the lake, and as it's continuing to fill up with dirt that's running off of everyone's property, we're losing capacity and we're losing water quality.
Erosion experts say a construction site will lose about 200 tons of sediment per acre per year, compared with just 5 to 7 tons per acre per year for a farm. The EPA considers sediment the leading cause of water pollution. It is also the most costly to fix. Stormwater is one of those chronic, almost invisible problems throughout the nation, throughout the developed world in general, because no one really thinks about rain as being a source of pollution, said Janelle Robbins, staff scientist with the Waterkeeper Alliance. North Carolina-based Muddy Water Watch estimates that sediment pollution causes $16 billion in environmental damage in the United States every year, with about 70% of the dirt pollution coming from human activities, such as land clearing for construction, logging, and farming.